All right, joint movement video here. I've been doing this for about an hour, so hopefully I can get this one right. All right, start off with the ankle, the talocrural joint, a hinge joint. So for the movements, you got inversion, eversion along the frontal plane. Then you got dorsiflexion, closer to the shin, plantar flexion away from the shin, along the sagittal plane, making that a biaxial joint with 2 degrees of freedom. Next is the knee, the tibiofemoral joint, a hinge joint. So you got flexion extension along the sagittal plane, and that's a uniaxial joint with 1 degree of freedom. Next is the hip, the iliofemoral joint, which is a ball and socket. So you got flexion extension along the sagittal, abduction, adduction along the frontal, and then you got circumduction on the transverse, making that a triaxial joint with 3 degrees of freedom. Next is the shoulder, the glenohumeral joint, which is also a ball and socket. So you got flexion extension here along the sagittal, abduction, adduction along the frontal plane, and then circumduction here along the transverse plane, also making that a triaxial joint with 3 degrees of freedom. Next is the elbow, hinge joint. You got the humeral radial joint, the humeral ulnar joint, and the radial ulnar joint. So for movements, you got flexion extension along the sagittal, and then you got neutral grip here, palm up supination, palm down pronation, also along the sagittal. So elbow is uniaxial with 1 degree of freedom. Next is the wrist, which is a condyloid joint. So you got radiocarpal, midcarpal, intercarpal, carpal, metacarpal, and the inner metacarpal joint. So for the motions, you got flexion extension here along the sagittal, and then abduction, adduction along the frontal. That's a biaxial joint with 2 degrees of freedom. And then lastly, you got the cervical spine joints, which are facet joints. So you got atlanto-occipital joint and atlanto-axial joint. So you got flexion extension here along the sagittal, flexion extension here along the frontal, and then the cervical rotation here along the transverse plane, making that a triaxial joint with 3 degrees of freedom. Thank you.